Rebecca Campbell. I think we'll have some other people that are going to join, but they'll hop in when they hop on. I am a psychotherapist at Sasko River Center and the Director of Therapy Services. And I'm here today to talk about parenting across the life cycle. Let's get started with the agenda. Oh, gracious. I can't. Oh, here we go. Okay. Our agenda for the day. Why? The why. Why am I talking about this? Why did I choose this topic for the day? We'll talk a bit about that. And then in doing so, we're going to touch upon Erik Erikson, who's a psychoanalyst from the 1950s, who developed some stages of psychosocial development. I'm going to take us through that, and we'll see how that intersects with incorporating compassion, curiosity, and connection across the life cycle for our own development, our kids' development, our society's development. And then I'd love to take questions when, I'll stop at the end of each slide. I only have a few slides. I have a lot to say, but I only have a few slides. I'll stop at the end of each slide to see if anybody has any questions, and you can unmute yourself. And then at the end of the presentation, I'd be happy to take any questions or comments. So let's kick it off. Let's start this. Okay, the why. Why did I choose this topic? I was approached by Sasko's parenting committee about speaking on a topic around parenting and incorporating compassion, curiosity, and connection as well. And at the time, I was speaking to a colleague about evolutionary psychology. And I'm not a psychologist, and I've actually never taken a class in evolutionary psychology, but I've learned a lot about it with my colleagues. And I just find it incredibly relevant in how we've evolved and understanding our brain development and the way that our brain continues to seek and anticipate and kind of hunger for certain dynamics within our environment in order to survive and evolve. And I consider the ideas and the dynamic around compassion, curiosity, and connection to be very intertwined and relevant to evolution. So I think I thought that would be cool to kind of combine everything and talk about where we are also as adults, as parents in the life cycle. And comparing kind of our jungles, like our jungles today are obviously much different than our prehistoric ancestors, but we still need to work together to communicate, to nurture each other and to evolve into communities, into civilizations. Certainly not one human or one group is going to survive the jungle if we can't effectively support each other and grow together. And this really starts at the one-to-one, the family level within the family system. And this is where relating, communicating, nurturing, learning begins. And then it gets generalized into the peer groups, into the community, into our societies, and that's how we've evolved. And so our best chance of surviving as people is if we kind of have our tribe. And as we'll notice, and as a lot of us probably already have noticed, those of us with kids, that are parents, is that our jungle has evolved and so has parenting. Now, I don't know, I'm sure there are statistics out there about if parenting is more difficult than when probably a lot of us grew up. And I guess that depends on how we define more difficult. But certainly in this world where we're living, where everything's like 24/7, everywhere, all the time, running at such a rapid pace, moving quickly, polarizing. I mean, our mental health, youth mental health really has shown that they are struggling more with anxiety and depression. So it's reasonable to consider then that life is more complex and parenting probably is more difficult than when I was growing up in the 80s. I had a client around the time when the most recent season of Stranger Things was coming out. I don't watch Stranger Things, but I'm aware of the time frame. I know I've enjoyed like listening to some soundtracks because it's good 80s music. But anyway, this client of mine was kind of saying, they're like, oh, I wish I grew up then. Life seems so much more simple. They could just ride their bikes, There weren't phones around, and life just seemed more simple and easier. And I mean, I certainly had my challenges growing up, but I think they have a point. It seems like life was maybe a little bit more simple then. Our kids are really now growing up in a world that just feels so much more complex, with the advent of all this new technology and the fast pace of where we live, especially. So I wanted to take some time now to move to the next slide, which is going to touch upon Erik Erikson's life stages. I'm just figuring out how to move my cursor here. Oh, there we go. So Erik Erikson was a psychoanalyst in the 50s, and he developed these 8 psychosocial stages of development. And at each stage of development, the child and the adult is negotiating some tasks. And it takes us from, you can see, from birth through the life cycle. And it starts with infancy. So I'm just going to go through these, talk a little bit about them. We're going to land at middle adulthood for a little while. That's where a lot of us are, because it's relevant. And so we can kind of, those of us that have kids that are on the call can kind of relate, or we work with kids to maybe where they are in development, and then we'll land on where we are in development and how the different themes that are incorporated at our stage of middle adulthood. So infancy, which is birth to 18 months, is what he would say. They're negotiating trust versus mistrust. Is the world a trustful place? Are my needs getting met, basically? There was a psychoanalyst named Donald Winnicott that talked about good enough mothering, and providing, nurturing, and satisfying the needs in a good enough way. Not 100% of the time, which would be nearly impossible, but even Erikson would say a little bit of mistrust is healthy. You want your infant to develop some sort of distress tolerance, but as long as the trust outweighs the mistrust, Erikson would say they're going to negotiate this stage really well. As parents at this stage of the game, we're tired, we're exhausted. Life we're incorporating a new human in our home, within our emotional structure. It's feeling like a lot. And there's also some beauty and some excitement. We have this new little person in our lives. People are gathering around. Tribe is expanding. And we move on to early childhood, which Erikson would talk about autonomy versus shame and doubt. And early childhood is defined around the ages of 18 months to 3 years. So there's some more physicality happening. There's autonomy versus shame and doubt, meaning, am I capable as a child? Can I start to do things? Can I start to move around? If you want to picture you're at a park and your child is toddling off to the playground and they're kind of looking back at you for some reassurance, you look at them, you're cheering them on, you give them a little bit of, you let out the leash a little bit to let them try things and make some decisions and have some choices. And you're supportive of that. So they can feel like they have a bit of a sense of agency in the space that's safe for them. If you give them a choice of t-shirts and shorts to put on and they mismatch it, you go with it, even if you think it's not really what you would have chosen. But if you start to question their choices or impose some shame and doubt on a choice that you've given them, they're going to start to feel reluctant and feel like they don't have that agency to make choices, which can get in the way of negotiating the next stage. Oh, and by the way, parents, we're still tired at this point. We're tired. Maybe hopefully our kids are sleeping a little bit better. Maybe they're developing a routine. And, it's exciting because they're toddling around, they're moving around, they're exploring, they're navigating, and maybe they're having some play dates. We're meeting some new people through our kids as they go into preschool. The preschool ages, they negotiate initiative versus guilt. So this is around the ages of like 3 to 5. And during this phase, they are developing some purpose, initiative. So they're, maybe they're in a classroom for a little while. A lot of kids do go to preschool at this time. They are spending a little bit more time outside of the control of the parent. They're negotiating some social dynamics, some more play dynamics, sharing, feeling like they have purpose, and they're pulling forward some of that autonomy that they built up during childhood to take more initiative. And as long as we encourage that, they make mistakes. It's okay. We're going to learn and grow from that. We're going to try things again. We're going to support the growth around failures. And that is going to help to take them into the next stage of school age, which is really when they're entering into a building for a longer period of time, around the age of 5, elementary school. They're spending time with a lot more kids, a lot more adults. As they grow through the elementary stage, they're learning to become industrious, hardworking. They are seeing if I try hard, then the things that I want to happen are going to happen. If I try hard and things don't happen the way that I want them to happen, that's okay, because I know that my support system is going to help me through that. And we have to remember that when they're in that school building all day, and even on the soccer fields afterwards, or at the musical practices, or in dance class, they're still negotiating all these social dynamics and evaluations that are happening so much more at this stage than they've ever gone through before. Grade levels, reading levels, grades start to happen. Socially, the phones, the group chats, the lunch table seating, all these things. I guess they actually don't get to choose where they get to sit at lunch until middle school, but there's build up to that. Self-confidence starts to take shape. As parents, life is becoming more complex as well, inside the home and outside the home. They're bringing home some homework. If your child is having trouble with homework, maybe one of the ways that you help them exercise their industry is you give them some space to try it on their own. Then maybe you say, listen, if you can't figure it out, I see you're frustrated, in the next 10 minutes, I'll sit with you. And if we can't figure it out, why don't you go see your teacher tomorrow and they can help you. So you help them be industrious as well. You move them through it. And we don't want to stifle their need for exploration and trying new things at this time, whether or not it's trying out a little bit of technology with our help, or trying out a new sports team, or trying out a new friend group, because the next stage, adolescence, exploration is kind of the name of the game. Adolescence is what Erickson would term as identity versus role confusion. And it is such a time of self-discovery, self-exploration, societal exploration. They're trying new things, taking some risks. Maybe there's some battle happening in the home as a result. They're testing boundaries, they're separating, and that is part of their job. That is part of developing their identity. And it can incorporate some of the family values, and maybe it incorporates some of their friend group's values, as their friends can almost become like their second family. And their world that they are growing up in as adolescents, as we're probably seeing for those of us that have adolescents, how it probably is coming into play more so even during school age, is just more complex. It's not how we grow up. Most of us didn't grow up with this level of intensity and so many pressures. And I mean, a lot of us probably are looking at the next stages of college, and those rates are up. It's just becoming a place where, as parents even, we're negotiating ourselves in these moments, as well as trying our best to get our kids through this. And it's especially hard and can be really confusing for parents, because in the beginning, early childhood, preschool, was kind of physical. We kind of realized a lot of output, a lot of physical output. Certainly there was emotional output. And now it's almost, so I'll tell a quick story. I have 3 kids, and 2 are pretty young in age, close in age rather. And I was at the grocery store when I think my 2 youngest were either 2 and 3 or 3 or 4. And I had them in the cart going through, we need the groceries. They're having a great time, but they're, reaching for things. They're reaching for each other. I'm trying to have a good time. I'm exhausted. I must have looked it. And this woman comes up to me, who was probably in my life stage at middle adulthood, and remarked, "Oh, they're so cute. I miss this time in life." And I kind of looked at her like, "What are you talking? This is, I'm so tired." And she was like, "Oh, honey," she said, "bigger kids, bigger problems." And I was like, I don't really know what that means, but I can't wait till my kids are like walking and talking and taking themselves to the stores. And I have anecdotally spoken to friends and even, seen it in the room. These are more emotional, complex times raising adolescents. So it can be bigger kids, bigger problems. And And these kids who you used to solve problems for or help to navigate the right ways around the right ways as far as you see making the choices, now they're going to want to do it on their own, which can be pretty humbling and hard to have patience for and a little bit scary. And especially if they have that attitude that a lot of the teenagers can have, you know, they kind of want to turn away from you so that they know they've needed you their entire lives. They have to know that to take the next step into young adulthood, they don't need you as much. So that can look like the snark or the rolling of the eyes or the, oh my gosh, you're so embarrassing kind of thing. And that can bring up a lot for parents. Not only is it just hard to be on the other side of that, but I'll talk about the difficulty and the struggle that can bring up for parents in just a little bit. But as your adolescent moves through this stage, maybe they go to college, maybe they stay home, maybe they move someplace else and just start working. If they've negotiated adolescence well enough and they have a sense of identity, they're going to move on to young adulthood, which Erickson would talk to around intimacy versus isolation. And the task here really is to develop intimate relationships, maybe a romantic one, maybe a love interest. Erickson describes intimacy as a reciprocal relationship, some love and honesty, connection, compassion, and it's kind of setting the stage a little bit for middle adulthood, which happens next. The roots are about to go down. Maybe they're starting to go in the ground with the people that you want around you or the people that are in your life and your support system. If you haven't quite negotiated intimate relationships, again, these are friends as well and within the family too, you might isolate. You might not feel those connections. This might affect your mental health. It's going to affect how you feel about yourself in the world. Certainly having that practice during adolescence, that practice during school age of socializing, understanding how people feel, understanding who you are to people helps to develop positive, healthy relationships. Perhaps that wasn't really negotiated as well during those earlier stages. You still have time, but isolation can certainly lead to not being able to move forward as well into middle adulthood, which is where I would imagine a lot of us are. Erickson would describe this stage as around 30-ish to 65-ish, 70-ish. And the task is generativity. And that is taking care of the next generation, basically, giving back, making your mark, contributing to the next generation through parenting, work, volunteering, community involvement. And Erickson would say, and others in the field currently even would say that giving back creates a sense of value, whether or not you're giving back to your kids or people in your community or your family, and a sense of value in oneself is gonna, and giving back is also more long lasting because you kind of see the effects, and you're gonna want to do it again. It creates those good feelings. It creates some oxytocin. It stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, which allows you that rest and digest to kind of feel good about yourself and calm in your world. If you're not getting that feedback of value that you're contributing, this can lead to stagnation, which Erickson would describe. And research does show that it does lead to stagnation, meaning like you're not involved, you're lonely, you're kind of isolated. Maybe that started in young adulthood. Maybe you hit middle adulthood and something kind of fell aside. Perhaps you lost your job or you had a major life rupture and you've been unable to really right yourself since, and you stagnated. It can lead to lower performance of cognitive functioning, lower quality of relationships, loneliness, poor mental health, and maybe losing that tribe has also happened to you, and you're just not able to find supports to get yourself to the next, standing back up straight. So, which is why it speaks to having supports and negotiating that young adulthood being so important with intimacy. The good news is that there are opportunities in middle adulthood to kind of access the stages that we just talked about in ways to help to get oneself feeling that sense of autonomy, value, initiative again. If you remember infancy, when we talked about trust versus mistrust, the community that we're in, if you're feeling isolated and lonely and you need to get yourself back to a place of value, connecting with the community was really helpful in that way, and developing trust that they're going to be a support system for you. Certainly, if we have children, developing a community that we trust is important, because we're going to be allowing our child to be in their trust. During early childhood, we talked about autonomy, going out into the world and doing things for ourselves. Maybe you just hiked a mountain that you'd never done before. Maybe you felt super capable taking over Sunday dinner one time. Or maybe you're exploring a new hobby that you've never thought about. And this is the time when you're going to try to take a step outside your comfort zone to do that. And then parallel to that feeling of initiative during our preschool stage, talked about responsibility for tasks and decisions and decision-making. Perhaps you're going to decide to go sit on a board and make a meaningful change in your community. Perhaps you're going to plan a family reunion and get people together and organize your loved ones. School-aged kids were negotiating industry, working hard, trying hard at something and seeing some results. Maybe you just DIY'd your back deck and you're feeling super awesome about that. And you're going to have people over and talk about it and feel industrious. And maybe it's going to take you to DIY another part of your house and make some good change. Maybe you just taught your child how to ride a bike. That is industrious. I mean, it's difficult, and it also requires a lot of patience. So that definitely falls under that umbrella. And then there's the identity piece of adolescence. And I pause there because we have, through the life cycle, developed at this point probably a pretty consistent sense of who we are. And as we talked about with our kids growing up, or even if you don't have kids and you're in this stage, you've had different relationships and you probably have a sense of who you are and what's important to you. And during middle adulthood, we can really struggle with some losses of identity. And that can really shake our foundation. You know, we might feel like, or not feel like, we might have lost loved ones. We might have lost a job. We might have lost ability to be physical like we want to be. We might be realizing that we're getting older. Our bodies aren't working like they used to. They're shifting, they're changing. Maybe our memory's not as good. Maybe we're overwhelmed and we just don't feel as capable. So there can be a loss in identity of how you saw yourself, how you see yourself now. And then, oh my gosh, what's life going to look like as I get older? How does this change? And negotiating that can be scary, and it can be really difficult if you don't have a sense of community and some supports in place. And so, which is similar to adolescence, right? Like developing a sense of who you are, who's important to you, developing those coping skills. And your identity as a parent certainly shifts, as we've noticed, as we've gone through the life stages and how they've changed. And, you know, you might have that sense of losing your kids too. Like they're going to grow up, they're going to be out of the house. Perhaps you're in a relationship that's really socialized around your children, and then, oh my gosh, I don't have any friends, or I used to work before I had kids, now I don't work, now what am I going to do? So there's a lot of negotiation that goes on around this. Now it's not, I feel like I'm like totally doom and gloom. It's not all doom and gloom. There's a lot of positives that can come about this, in being able to recognize that there's opportunity for growth in new identities, and trying to flip the script and seeing it through a different kind of lens. Like I'm sure a lot of us, I mean, I remember when my kids were getting older and I didn't need to spend forever during the bedtime routine, or, you know, it's super cute that your kids want to ask you a lot of questions, but like asking why 87 times can get really exhausting. And with adolescents, you know, can I have money for this? Can I borrow the car? I'll clean up my room. Like, as they're getting older and up out of the house, there are some positives that come with our kids growing up and leaving us and not needing us as much. So I do want to point that out because loss is difficult to talk about. And also there are positives that can come from loss. So here we are spanning the stages here. And how can we continue to evolve in the best way for ourselves, and for our children and our community and our loved ones? And I realized I didn't stop after my first slide. I'm going to stop right now for a second. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and has a question or a comment, I'd be happy. I'll give about a few seconds to see if anybody wants to do that, and I'll take a sip of water. Okay, I think we're good to go. We're going to go on to the next slide, which is compassion, curiosity, and connection. So over the life cycle, what does this mean to me? So I pulled off from the internet, the Merriam-Webster dictionary's definitions. Let's start with compassion. Compassion is described as sympathetic consciousness of others' distress with a desire to alleviate it. So evolutionarily, we've needed to nurture and treat with compassion.
I'm going to Mahjong.
Oh, right.
I think
Okay.
somebody's unmuted.
Do you want to come?
Or can somebody mute themselves?
I don't think I'm allowed.
Thank you. Right, evolutionarily, we've needed to exercise compassion to nurture each other and reduce distress. I mean, how are we gonna build and gather if we're super, super stressed out about, the impending storm clouds that are coming as we're in the jungle? We need to treat each other with nurturing compassion and bring people's stress levels down so that we can be productive and we can interact with each other. Now, as we mentioned before, we don't want to alleviate all stress. From a parenting perspective, I'm sure people have heard back in the day about helicopter parenting. Now there's the idea of snowplow parenting. That is not compassionate parenting. Getting rid of all your kids' stressors and sources of anxiety is not helpful for them. We need to support our kids in developing distress tolerance and negotiating challenges and struggles, having a growth mindset about failures and mistakes. We see it across all the life stages that encouraging our kids through these challenges only helps them grow and want to take more initiative and be more industrious and figure out what feels good to them. So nurturing this along the life cycle is crucial. As adults and as parents, giving back to the community, like we talked about in this life stage, the generativity has to do with being compassionate, giving back, giving to your children, giving to your family, the community, your religious organization, anywhere, everywhere. It just creates a sense you feel valuable. You're going to want to keep doing it again. And it's a motivator. And self-compassion is so important. You're showing up for sessions like this to learn about parenting, to learn about your kids, to educate yourself, to feel validated. Self-compassion looks like taking the time out. It looks like going out with your friends. It looks like self-validation and understanding that you also need to nurture yourself through the life cycle, checking in with yourself. And be curious with yourself too, leading us to curiosity, a desire to know, inquisitive interest in others' concern, interest leading to inquiry. So a desire to know about parenting. Get to know your kid. Every child wants to be known by their parent. They want to be adored by you. If your preschooler brings home some drawing and they're so excited to see you, you've just gotten home, your phone's blowing up, put your phone away, put your attention to your preschooler, ask questions about that drawing. It is going to be like depositing money into a piggy bank. It is going to help them feel valuable. You're going to feel good at the end of the day, because you're going to get to know your child. You are spending time with them, and that's going to feel valuable to you, even though in the moment it might be really difficult. And then, if this also looks like, if you're more of a court field sports person and your child wants to take up fencing, and you had all these ideas of them being, you know, a Division I lacrosse player, you have to check that to the side and get to know fencing, be curious, be interested in your child. This also means if you're somebody that checks your kids' grades on PowerSchool, whatever platform your school uses, which I think is a really slippery slope, by the way, if you do it and you see the chem grade falling, you see some Fs in there or some missed assignments, instead of coming at them with that, maybe sit down and be like, so, hey, how's chem going? Give them a chance first to talk about their experience. Be curious about their experience first before you throw your judgment on them, and try not to make a judgment. I would go at it in a way of curiosity. You know, similarly, if you find something suspicious in their room, don't pick it up, throw it in their face and say, you're never seeing your friends again. You sit down, you have a conversation. Hey, listen, I found this. What's going on? What does this do for you? Like, what are we talking about here? Be curious about your kids. Evolutionarily, it's how we learned about each other. It's how we learn new skills. It's how we grew as a society. It's how we evolve, is by getting to know each other, finding out how people think, being curious about our impact on others. And for yourselves as parents in our stage, as we're moving through the wins, the losses, be curious about how that feels. Be curious about what other people are doing. If you're not feeling great, your body's going through something, do a little research, talk to your doctor, talk to friends, take up a new activity. Be curious about what's out there so you can continue to grow. And finally, connection. The definition here, the first piece almost reads like in a sequential way, but then Merriam-Webster points out a relation of personal intimacy. So connection, you know, made me think about, like, how do we connect? We connect through language. We collect, therefore, like words, tone, body language, eye contact, sharing space. So with our children, through the life cycle, this can look a lot of different ways. You know, if you have a younger child, they might want your ear a lot and want to be chatting a lot, and you can be talking with them. Connection can come with body, you know, there's a lot of physicality in the younger stages, a lot of connection to the body, moving your body, using your body language. Kids certainly react a lot to parental tone. That's something to keep in mind. If you have an adolescent, they might rather not connect with you at this point. I mean, in fact, it's part of their developmental stage to disconnect in a way. As I mentioned before, they kind of need to know that they don't need you in order to be able to be successful. So there might be a disconnect, which, you know, some parents are like, gosh, how do I connect with my kid? I don't really know what's going on in their lives. They don't let me in. Maybe that just looks like sharing space. And sometimes I'll talk to people and say, developing relationships can really have to do with, at a foundation, having shared experiences, because then you have things in common, and that creates connections. And so if your kid has their screen time, they're laying on the couch in your living room on their phone, maybe sit in the living room with them and read a book, maybe go on your phone, maybe just kind of hang out and do some breathing exercises, share space with your child. That also can be really effective with an adolescent in a car. Maybe let them play their music. Don't judge it. You might not like it. I don't think my parents necessarily loved my music taste when I was a teenager, but again, that's part of the curiosity thing too. And it's part of sharing space and making a connection to your child. And it doesn't have to be necessarily via language all the time. So I think certainly having compassion and curiosity can absolutely help solidify connection as well. And all of these bolster a sense of value in oneself, value about the relationship, and having that foundation in ourselves and in our community can really help us with this life stage as we negotiate so much change in our lives, as it's happening now and as it's to come. And I think that keeping these three ideas of compassion, curiosity, and connection in the forefront, and how they can relate to your own self-care and the care of your loved ones, is really productive and relevant. So I'm done with my presentation, at a stopping point here. I know we have about 20 more minutes, which is some time. If anybody has anything that they want to share, comment, ask questions around, I'd be glad to open this up. And it's a beautiful day as well. People just want to hop off and exercise some self-compassion and go for a walk. That's cool too. So if anybody wants to unmute, feel free. Oh, there's something in the chat. Maybe that's, oh. How can I get my twin 14-year-olds to do a sport? At the moment, neither do anything. Twin girls. How can you get them to do a sport? Well, getting 14-year-olds to do anything is probably tricky. I guess my question would be, and Kate, I'd be happy to talk offline with you as well, or any kind of exercise, right? Is your concern about this is getting them to be active, I guess is what you're saying. And maybe you're wanting them to do that because I don't know if you just think it's part of good mental health practice to be active and just good for their bodies, or maybe there's another kind of concern. But what I would say is, I think that a lot of times with adolescents, their peer groups, as I mentioned, can become their second family, can become really influential in the decisions that they make. And physical health, right? So it's not too late, first of all. Some 14-year-olds, so I imagine that your 14-year-olds are probably just entering high school, maybe. A lot of growth and change happens in high school. They're around a lot more people, different ages, different sports, lots of clubs open up, different activities. I think that finishing 8th grade, right? So they're going to round the corner. So I'm not sure if you if there's another parent, if the parents are really pushing it, but the best thing you can do, in my opinion, and again, Kate, I'd be happy to chat with you about this separately if you want, if this doesn't give you enough of a guide, is back off of that. Back off of it, model it yourself. The more you push an adolescent, it is their innate drive to want to separate and make decisions on their own. I can't tell you how many adolescents I've had actually say, my mom really wants me to go to the gym, and I was going to go to the gym, but no, I'm not going to go to the gym, because like they need it to be their choice. They need to be able to start making their own choices. So especially if it's something that's creating this in your family, if you can just try to breathe and give them some space to discover it on their own. They obviously know it's something that you want them to do. They probably have heard in health class that it's good for them. And this is a frustrating answer, but but maybe you leave it to them to discover a way in which they want to be physical, and you hope that their friends open it up to them. I mean, again, Kate, I'm happy to chat with you offline, because I'm not sure what kind of supports are in their lives or other resources you have to influence them in a positive way, but that could be an opportunity too. I mean, they're smart enough too to know if you're trying to like slide something in there to get them to do something they're not ready to do. But that's actually, to that end, if anybody wants to contact me, my email address is rcampbell, CAMPBELL @SascoRiverCenter.com. And you can always call Sasco and get in touch with me that way. So I'm happy to talk more about that. Yeah, Kate, definitely give me a call for sure. It's a great question, because, you know, certainly physical movement is great for mental health. And there are a lot of adolescents that that are a little bit stagnated in their own way, and they can get stuck. And there's a lot of comparison and pressure and depression and anxiety and fear of trying new things. So it's a really tricky time. And it's not linear, and every kid's different. Every family system is different. So it's great that you're asking the question.
And Rebecca, this is Kate again. Just
I don't want to take up all your time or anybody else's time, but just to ask, like one of my twins recently lost their best friend. And this was like, they had an argument. Juniper tried to apologize, find out what the problem was, try and work through it. The other child didn't want to do that. So there's been a complete loss and separation. And Juniper also had sort of like all her eggs in one basket. So they're not really any other good friends, just sort of more acquaintances at school. And I just don't really know how to support her through that. And my other twin, who has autism, sort of struggles with making connections as well, and is really only interested in a couple of high school kids that I'm like anxious about. So I guess the main question is how do you support sort of healthy relationships or encourage kind of healthy relationships with teens, they're sort of their own age and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. First, I'm sorry. It's really hard. It's so hard to watch your kids struggle. I think, as parents, we have our own struggles, and as I mentioned, I'm a parent. I think it's almost harder to watch my kids struggle than deal with my own struggles.
Yeah.
And there's so much fear around making the good friendships and having the healthy relationships. And it is also kind of, the growth opportunity here is that Juniper is going to struggle, and she's going to have your support as a parent, her safe place, getting some empathy and some nurturing rather, and potentially nourishing, in being able to have home be a safe space, have maybe other family members be a place of connection. And making the new connections. I'm not sure what kind of summer opportunity. Well, so supporting her, I think, in your home looks like you validating, you being around, you supporting exploration of maybe if she's interested in a new activity or something happening this summer. I'm not sure if she's going away to camp, like any other avenues that she has to let her feel a sense of value, maybe do some community service, giving back, like what I talked about, being compassionate for adults. Oh my gosh, 100% exists in kids. It's the value of volunteering and exposing children to that, because they start to feel really valuable that way in giving back. So maybe getting creative with yourself and with her around other opportunities to make her feel valuable. And maybe that will lead to her feeling a little more self-assured, because certainly losing a friend like that's going to shake her self-confidence a little bit and shake her security. I'm not sure if you're in a school system where there are a bunch of, where everybody continues to the same high school, or if there are different schools feeding into it. There could be opportunities there to make new friends. And certainly I just know anecdotally that friendships shake up, people shake up and grow between in the summertime. So she might hit 9th grade and there could be somebody sitting next to her in class that she's never really had a conversation with. There could be more opportunities in clubs and things, but I guess it's about getting her through right now. And also tolerating her despair. That's hard for a parent, but I think for you to be there with her, and her dad, to know that it's okay to feel sad. And here, let's see what we can do in the next couple of days to try to find that sense of value or get her to feel a different kind of feeling state. I don't know if she does any artwork, or I know she's not physically active, but if she has other interests that she could
she definitely loves artwork, does a lot of drawing on her iPad with Procreate, and loves to read as well. That's
awesome. I mean, that's tremendous. That's mindfulness. I mean, that's taking her head away from any kind of stress or anxiety she's had about this rupture, and being able to calm and feel competent and valuable and industrious, and doing her artwork on her iPad and reading and picking out books. So, these situations, it does develop resilience. It's hard in the moment, but it's going to be one of those stories that she's going to actually grow from. There are, it's hard. There are so many friendships that go on, so much relational aggression. Friends drop each other on a dime. I can't tell you how many stories I know of girls just like dropping out of each other's lives without any explanation, ghosting them. It's horrific.
Right.
It's really
Right.
really hard and hurtful. I've seen adults do it too. It's kind of crazy, the technology, how much like courage it gives people.
Yeah. It's
Terrible.
crazy.
But regarding your other daughter, you know, the high schoolers that they have an interest in, again, perhaps once they get to high school, they're going to meet more people in their classes. I'm not sure if if they have like an IEP, if there are any, like, certainly making connections with adults has been found to be a huge protective factor in development. And that really happens so much more in high school. And it encourages that sense of value to have a connection with an adult. And so there are a lot of opportunities to do that in high school as well. And that can, for some kids, certainly peer connections are so important, but having a trusted adult and adult relationships also feels really good.
Yeah, Chloe does have an IEP, and she has some great relationships with her current 8th grade teachers.
Yeah.
But she's got some really strong adult relationships, you know, trusted adults and people that she likes to talk to and stuff. So that all is good.
Yeah, I mean, that's especially because schools where they spend a lot of time. So you want them to feel comfortable there. And if they have people that they feel comfortable within that big building, assuming it's a big building, they all are, they're going to be able to learn better, feel better about themselves, and potentially take risks and socialize a little bit more with people that they might not have otherwise.
Right. Yeah, no, that sounds good. Thank you.
Great questions. Thanks for participating.
Absolutely. This is wonderful. Unfortunately, I was a few minutes late, so I missed the very beginning, but I joined in right at adolescence, which was like perfect.
Good. Glad to have you. Well, I don't even know what time it is. Where's my clock thing on here? 10 minutes. I'll give it another couple minutes, and then everybody can maybe take some time and enjoy the weather. I think it's supposed to rain in a couple days or tomorrow or something. Enjoy the sunshine. Well, thank you, everyone. I think that for those that participated, it's being recorded, and that'll get sent out. If anybody wants to pass it along, feel free. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. This was fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. And feel free, Kate, if you have other questions, just to get in touch with me.
Yes, I certainly will. Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care.